We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. We want to talk everything off season, but first I have to ask, how you doing, Mike?
I'm doing pretty good. I love the weather. Summer's great. I love heat. It rained a lot the past couple of days though, so I don't love that. But I don't know. Summer's my favorite season. Probably not yours. It
I'm
seems
a fall
like not a
girl.
super popular.
Yeah,
Fall's
I'm a fall
yeah.
girl. I was
Fall
born,
gets too cold too quick. That's my issue.
yes, I agree with that. I was born in August. So I've always kind of wished I had a birthday that was in September because when you're a kid, you always miss your birthday during school when you're born in August if you were born before the start date. So I'm a little partial to let's get the fall. I love the fall. I love football. I love the weather, but I agree with you. It does get cold too soon in the fall.
Yeah, I feel like there's like September is a really good month.
Hmm.
By October, the high is like 45 some days. I don't like that. Also, as somebody who had my birthday sometimes at school, usually around Easter time, so not always,
Hmm.
overrated. Or I would rather not have to go to school on my birthday than have people like half-heartedly wish me a happy birthday.
I mean, you get to bring
Got
your.
announced on the announcements once before. I
Hmm.
skipped it in high school. I just didn't go the one day. I was like, I'm not going, man.
We didn't get I obviously wasn't on the announcement. I blame my parents. I was born in the summer. But yeah, we're here. We're in the summer break for the Cincinnati Bengals, and one of the things we're gonna try and do between now and training camp, which it's crazy to think about because July is going to be on Saturday, so we're almost there. We'll get down to the weeks of training camp hype and which player's in his best shape of his life, what the offensive line's gonna look like, maybe
All of them.
contract extensions.
There's gonna be players you haven't heard of. They're in the best shape of their life.
We are going to have fun with that. The week before training camp, we're gonna come up with all of the sayings that we're gonna hear. Maybe we'll connect them to players who we're gonna hear it about.
Chris
Throw
Evans
some
is working out at wide receiver. Or you
I
already
mean,
working on him.
it's gonna be absolutely insane. So maybe we'll have a little fun with that when we get closer to training camp. But right now, I said, let's do Tuesdays. Let's do a little player profile. It doesn't have to be the most popular player on the team. It could be a new guy, one we don't talk about enough. And I felt like we were getting a lot of questions last week about Irv Smith Jr. And listening to the coordinators, Brian Callahan, talk about him. Just been really impressed with what he was able to do in the offseason program with this offense, that early connection with Joe Burrow. As we've mentioned before, tight ends really see success with Joe Burrow if they can get that healthy year in. So maybe Irv Smith will see that and that connection's there. I want to talk everything Irv Smith. I'm going to let you drive.
Okay. I will start this with who had more yards, Hayden Hurst or CJ Uzama in the last 2 years? Like which one for the Bengals had more yards?
CJ Uzama?
He did. Yeah, 493. And he
Close.
had more touchdowns. But that is also what the bar is for what the Bengals are get tight ends paid. They get to make, these guys look better. It's less than 500 yards. It's 5 touchdowns is the peak. So let's slow the horse a little bit because there's just so many mouths to feed, and you're not going to get to any of the tight ends that they've had before you get to Tyler Boyd, and you're probably not gonna get to them before you get Mixon his touches. So you're looking at like the fifth guy in the cycle here. Pecking order. I was thinking that, geez, the fifth guy in the pecking order. So they're not going to end up. They might be talented enough for a 700-yard season, 7 touchdown type thing. Maybe even in some situations they could go for double-digit touchdowns, but there's just so many mouths to feed, right? Because Jamar Chase is going to get probably at least be on pace when he's healthy for somewhere around 1,500 yards, and T. Higgins at least 1,200, and Tyler Boyd is going to push for 1,000. And well, now you're already at 3,700 yards. And how many more does Burrow throw? Plenty of those are going to go to the running back. Some goes to tight end. Some will go to Charlie Jones. Some will go to Trent Irwin. Some of those will go to the backup running backs. It's just there's a lot. So when we're talking statistically, what do we think Irv Smith can do? Do you think that he does better, worse, or about the same? Like, where do you think he falls statistically this year? Where do you think he will fall between Hurst and Uzama? They both were in between 400 and 500 yards. Do you think that's where Smith Smith ends up?
Okay, I will say this about him, just because his build is different, more of a receiver type,
Mm-hmm.
that I would say, and if he can stay healthy, I always feel like you have to add that asterisk. And no offense to Irv Smith, but I always just feel like that connection's there. So far early in his NFL career, I would say,
He's missed. You mean you're fully valid here. He's missed an entire season, and then he missed 9 games last year. So
I would probably say, because we're going around the range of what Hayden Hurst, CJ Zama, they were able to do over the last few years. I would say he could get close to 600, around the
okay,
600.
we'll say with Hurst, missed 4 games. So
That's true.
Hurst may have been able to push past. He had more yards per game than Uzama, so he might have been able to push past 500.
There was some drops, big ones, big ones.
You mean from the next guys up?
I mean, Hayden Hurst could have had a few more yards in the
Oh,
AFC
okay.
game if he would have.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah. When you make I'll never forget because I made the plus $10,000 bet that Ader scores the first touchdown and he dropped it. Oh, that was part of a parlay that was never going to hit. Not worried about it.
I'm not bitter about the AFC Championship game at all. You know, we're looking forward. You have Irv Smith Jr. But tell me a little more about him, because I think the next thing people make a connection with is, can he block? Blocking. Can he block? Is it going to help this offense? And can Irv Smith Jr. block?
So I think it's interesting because he tries, and that is something that never sounds great, but it is what it is. I mean, can he block like Rob Gronkowski? No. And I think I've even seen some people say like he's a good blocking tight end. Like, oh man, I don't know if I'd go that far because the issue is just he's a little small. And when he gives effort, he doesn't have the great length and he has the want to, but just not the body to make all these blocks. These blocks I'm talking about right now are blocks on defensive ends, maybe big outside linebackers and an odd 3-4 front. So basically defensive linemen that the tackle blocks. That's something that Rob Gronkowski, but even guys like Nick Boyle and Mercedes Lewis have made a living on being able to block those guys and basically be an offensive tackle. Irv, he's not an extra offensive lineman. He's good. I think you can use him well blocking. I think he does a lot, or at least some stuff well blocking. What I mean by that is I think he does a good job when he is blocking in space because he's a good athlete. And he does a good job tracking the linebackers, safeties, corners, whoever at the second level in space. A lot of guys miss that. That's one of the biggest parts, especially offensive linemen will miss that because they're not super shifty athletic. So they get a little move put on them and they completely whiff the block. Irv usually doesn't whiff that block. So he'll at least get on them. I think he does a good job sustaining and driving in space as well. When he's bigger than a guy, he exerts his will because he has a want to try to drive these guys. Overall, does that make him a great blocking tight end? Probably not, because the Bengals are going to ask him to block those defensive ends sometimes, and I think it's going to show up. I think once in a while you're just going to see like, yeah, I mean, he tried, but that TJ Watt's too good, or it could even be like, doesn't have to go TJ Watt level. Like Odafe Owe just beat him, and you just got to live with that sometimes because these tight ends, they're going to block ends on sometimes. That's just every NFL scheme has that happen, that you don't always get the offensive tackle on the end. Depends on the run you're giving, where you want your double team, etc. But if you want to put him out lead blocking on a screen, or you want to put him lead blocking on a toss play or something like that, I think he does a good job. And if you want to put him in the slot and have him block corners, great. I think that works out well too. But he's going to be asked, and I don't know how often. I don't think he will never succeed in blocking a defensive end. I just think that's an area that he won't consistently win at, even though he's going to give you good effort. And it did also feel, loved the interview Locked On Bengals, friends of the show, did with Brian Callahan, and it did seem like Brian was kind of saying something that's like, there's extra offensive tackle types, but they're not, really receivers. And you really just want a guy that's going to try hard. And Irv does that, which is all true. It's just it's off season, so expectations, I assume, are through the roof with
Yeah.
everybody. Yeah, just temper a little bit. Just temper a little bit and just say, like, you know, he's not going to win every block, but that's okay because he's going to add a lot of value as a tight end and a big slot receiver moving around, getting on mismatches, and he can add value blocking when he gets on guys in space. What he does on ends, if he gets a successful block there, gravy. That's just gravy on top of the mashed potato meat pie of Irv Smith.
When you think of just past history with tight ends, we talked about CJ Uzama, you look at Hayden Hurst. How would you compare Irv Smith Jr. to past history of types of tight ends that the Cincinnati Bengals have had? I mean, is he an upgrade over CJ and Hayden?
You upgrade because I think Uzama was the best blocker of the trio. I think he actually added some value there because, and he also had to kind of, that's how he stayed on the team early on. Really, he was a 5th round pick that was athletic and he learned how to block.
That's why he's on the Jets.
That's why he's on the Jets. That's right. They didn't bring in Tyler Conklin to block, so when they need a guy, they use Uzama. It is also a dumb, interesting trend that I have noticed is CJ Uzama is 6'6", Hayden Hurst is 6'4", and Irv Smith is 6'2". So they keep going down 2 inches on the tight end.
Not as tall as Trent Irwin.
Yeah, Trent Irwin's taller. Irv is the first one that is smaller too, but because Hayden Hurst was dense, he was 260. Uzama was 260, and Irv is about 240. So that is where the blocking part comes in. Is just he's 6'2", 240. 20 years ago, he's probably a wide receiver, but he's a good tight end now. But it's just once in a while it's going to show up. I don't know if I can say better. I think he's by far the most unique, though. I think he's unique for an NFL tight end, not just for a Bengals tight end. There's not a lot of 6'2", 240-pound guys playing tight end. Because they usually want someone taller. So that comes into play with some of the traditional tight end stuff you see. Is he going to be a monster on seam balls over the middle? I'm not sure because we haven't really seen it. He's not a great contested catch guy, and he's not super tall to just high point and moss over those linebackers. Could actually see T. Higgins in that spot maybe a little bit more than you do Irv. Who knows? But what can he do that other tight ends can't? He could actually be a vertical threat. I think that's something we always want from tight ends, but it's kind of rare. And he can actually do it. Although he did drop, I feel like I always have to preface with the national television, Monday Night Football. He did drop the one time. He got wide open. Let's talk about that part too. He was able to beat his guy, run deep, wide open down the field, but he did drop it. Would have been like a 70-yard touchdown. But you could throw bombs to him. That's something that's just, you didn't really see that with Hurst. And I can only remember a couple with Uzama even. And those were long developing, type plays. So best, I temper my expectations with that. I think he could be, especially as a pass catcher, because he's so unique. I think he's the best route runner of the trio. I think he's the one that you could use the best as a receiver. He's just not like your traditional tight end. He's kind of unique and interesting. And I think that's kind of my favorite part about everything is just how do they use a guy that's this unique type build at tight end? They clearly wanted him and they went out and got him in free agency. This wasn't just an accidental type thing or a late round draft pick, throw a flyer on him. They like him. So what is the idea on usage there? Is that something, because we saw in the AFC Championship game with Boyd out, where you go double-double, is that something where you couldn't push the field with Hurst? Although he did catch that nice, 15-yard out route to keep the drive alive on like 3rd and 12. Yeah, that was huge. But could Irv actually get an explosive out of that? I think that would be the exciting thing. Can you get a 20-plus yard gainer because they're putting a linebacker on your tight end that moves really well? So I'm interested to see. I think Irv to me is just really interesting. Hurst wasn't as interesting last year because it felt a little bit like, yeah, he's a solid tight end. He's athletic, but he's never really been a guy that you can push down the field stuff with. He had, I think, his lowest average depth of target, so they weren't throwing the ball very far down the field. With Irv, I almost expect the opposite. Are they going to push it a little bit with him? And they're going to use him in traditional tight end stick, tight end quick out type stuff, but are they also going to push it down the field? And I think that's going to be the most interesting part, because that could make or break whether he is the best tight end in the past 3 years, or whether he's just kind of, 400 to 500 yards out of here and get an okay deal somewhere else.
I mean, whatever helps them win the games, that's all that matters with Irv Smith Jr. If you can stay healthy, go get your bag at the end of the season. But for him, when you're on the field at the same time as T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, you're going to get the ball more than likely. So I think that's going to be really fun to see with this offense. And if you haven't listened to it already, highly recommend going to the Locked On Bengals podcast. You can hear the interview with Brian Kelly, and he talks about the offense, and it really just feels like his excitement. And I know he was on with Lap too. I listened to that podcast, and he just seems so pumped about what this offense is going to be. And it's crazy to think we've watched over the last few years and thought, wow, they could still do more. And we'll see how Irv Smith really impacts the offense, and hopefully he can stay healthy. But every week, again, leading up to training camp, we're going to do a little player profile on different guys. We'll throw it out on social media, and you guys can let us know who you want to hear from next. But next, we're going to talk about another new guy, Orlando Brown, next on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati, a little Irv Smith Jr., and then we're going to go ahead and talk about another junior, Orlando Brown Jr., an offensive lineman. Huge offseason pickup for the Cincinnati Bengals. He moves to left tackle. Hear those conversations in the offseason. Jonah Williams, is he going to play right tackle? What is that going to look like? And, we've mentioned it a couple of times on this podcast because we could talk offensive linemen all day for the Cincinnati Bengals. And it really feels like that Orlando Brown Jr., he came into Cincinnati and he's really just embracing his role. And I really enjoyed watching that so far this offseason.
Yeah, I'm doing the red stuff. I haven't seen him eat Skyline, but I've seen him be given Skyline merchandise. But also he's been around in the community and everything like that, stayed here instead of going to the White House. He just seems like he is really embracing Cincinnati. Yeah, I would say that. And he also was part of a great part of the schedule reveal with the mayor.
Yeah. Oh man. As long as the mayor was talking today, I'm going to say this really quickly. So as everybody knows, Taylor Swift is going to be playing at Paycor Stadium. It is connection to the Cincinnati Bengals because it's at Paycor. And the mayor was talking today for making it Taylor Swift Day on Friday, which I'm excited. I'm going to the concert. But I was so afraid he was going to say something that he would regret when he was talking. Every single time he makes something, some kind of.
I feel like he learned the lesson.
That was a bad moment. But yeah, I loved Orlando Brown Jr. being a part of that. That was absolutely huge. Just really, really been fun to watch. But there was another thing. I think he's great with the media. He did an interview with Anthony Munoz, and you could tell he sounded so excited to talk to Anthony, just as a player, but also doing the podcast with him. And I really recommend listening to that. It's on the Dan Horde podcast. But he was on NFL Live yesterday, and he said this. And I think a lot of people had mixed feelings, and mostly the people that live in Kansas City. But for the most part, I really didn't think he was wrong when he said it, but I'm going to repeat the quote. He said, on blocking for Joe Burrow, now as opposed to having to play in a lot more space with guys on my edge, guys have got to rush through me because Joe isn't necessarily at 12 and a half or 13 yards on certain drops. He's going to be about 7.5 getting the ball out. And if you go to this tweet from Twitter, you see some of the quote tweets. And for the most part, a lot of people are like, oh no, he's bashing Patrick Mahomes. How dare he? He left Kansas City and he's talking bad about him. He just needs to get over it. I didn't take it as a negative thing on Patrick Mahomes. They're different style of quarterbacks when they're out there. And that's going to be different for Orlando Brown. I want you to break down that quote and explain what Orlando Brown was saying.
Okay, so I watched it. I watched the segment, which was longer than the quote. And always love partial quotes, it's not the full thing, because he even makes it more clear that this is not a Patrick Mahomes bashing type thing when he talks about how some of this is by design, that Patrick's going to be that deep and the Bengals don't go that deep. The Bengals like to run more quick game 3-step drops from the shotgun, whereas the Chiefs will go for shot plays, 5-step drops, sometimes even a 7 in there, or play action and a deep drop and a deep set. And that's where he's supposed to be. But that's harder on the tackle because he's so far deep. But that's also how they get explosive plays because Patrick Mahomes can throw that ball 75 yards or whatever, and it doesn't matter how deep he is into the pocket. So I do think Patrick has had in his past the tendency to drift backwards in the pocket and kind of fall back, and end up creating some issues for himself. But he's also gotten better at it every year. So I think it's something he knows that he needs to get better at, similar to how Burrow may have taken too many sacks compared to the pressure, trying to do too much, etc., not playing perfectly on time always. And he's gotten much better at that, where he's not taking those sacks. So I think we have to give credit where it's due. At the same time, if you want to take the Orlando Brown comment as a Patrick Mahomes, he goes so deep in the pocket and Burrow stays perfectly up high in the pocket. Okay. I guess it's true. There's pros and cons for any quarterback, of course. I do think that a lot of this was scheme related, and that gets completely thrown out the window because in this age of media, it is very much a let's get clicks. Let's let's drive up the interest in this. It's not interesting to talk about 5-step drops versus 3-step drops or quick game, etc. It's interesting to talk about Mahomes. He sets pretty deep, doesn't he? Is it by design? We're not going to put that part in there. So that's a little bit of it, but also he's not wrong about tendencies too. And I think sometimes even Burrow might stay a little too tight to the front end of the pocket, especially with guys out. And now you've got Volson and an injured Karras and Sharping up there. Maybe you want to drop a little extra.
Yes,
and
please.
just give the interior a little space there. But I think it goes both ways. At the end of the day, whether it's scheme or quarterback tendency, yes, Burrow does not drop as deep into the pocket and the ball comes out quicker. That is both from tendency and scheme. Just going to reiterate that. It is not specifically Burrow so smart that he always gets the ball out well before dummy Patrick Mahomes. Like, no, Mahomes is also a smart quarterback. He is taking these deeper drops. It's by design that ball's not coming out super quick. Now, if one of these websites, which we have enough issues getting them to reliably track when the ball comes out, so probably not, but if it could be tied to the quarterback footwork, I think that would be really cool. Like the quarterback takes a 3-step drop and how quick is the ball out? 5-step drop, how quick is the ball out? Because that might actually tell you a little bit more than what it's telling you right now with just snap to throw timing. But I don't think we're going to get that anytime soon. I do think that Orlando is correct in that he won't be playing as much space. What does the Bengals offense then challenge an offensive tackle with? More power and the inside. So you have to stay correct inside and you can't get rushed through. And that is a little bit of something that Jonah Williams struggled with at times, where he could get bull rushed and he could give up the inside sometimes. I think Orlando Brown does a better job of forcing his guy to the outside, but Jonah does a better job when guys try to go around the outside, I think. So it won't. But as we've just talked about with everything, you can kind of turn the gears and see it doesn't matter as much. It doesn't matter as much if he gets beat around the outside if Burrow's higher in the pocket. It matters if he gets beat through him or to the inside, which Orlando Brown doesn't typically give up. Not going to say it'll never happen. It does happen to everybody. But when you're 360 pounds or whatever, ginormous, it's hard to go through you. And he does a good job of staying inside out. I think a better job than Jonah does. But Jonah might be the right tackle, so don't poo-poo it too much on that side. I think Collins also was a reason he didn't give up as many sacks, despite, I think, not playing super well, was he would force guys to the outside. He couldn't sustain his blocks, and he would kind of dive at them, but he wouldn't give them the inside that often or let them run him over. I think with the way the Bengals offense is operating and the way Burrow likes to operate, that is the way that you want to give up pressure around the outside like that, if you're going to give it up at all. And like Orlando talked about, that helps them. Guards makes their life a little harder because he's tight. He's tight to the top of the pocket. You got to keep a firm interior.
He's like, welcome to the league again, Cordell Volson. But yeah, that quote, I should say this, it was tweeted by a Kansas City media member, so it's gonna be
even better. Okay,
it makes sense why there was only a certain clip of that, and you hear more people, and you mentioned it, you're the first one to mention it, because I didn't see the whole clip, and you said, you got to watch the whole thing, and even if you look at that and you see what he said, it's not anything to bash Patrick Mahomes. You hear Patrick Mahomes talk about Orlando Brown Jr. I mean, he had a really great quote interview a couple weeks ago just about, oh man, we lose him to Cincinnati. That's a bummer for us, but I'm glad he's in a good situation. And you're not going to hear Orlando Brown say anything bad about Patrick Mahomes. That's absolutely silly. We can agree. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL right now. I mean, I think overall we could say that it's nothing surprising or crazy. Even Joe Burrow talked about it. Was he happy to say it? He was like, "Yeah, man,
Yeah,
he's the
Burrow
best."
agreed.
Yeah, he's like, he's the best right now. Like that's I think we can all agree on that. This isn't anything bad. There's this criticism with Orlando Brown Jr. and I just don't understand it because I mean, I know how people feel about Pro Bowl voting and everything like that, but he's a four-time Pro Bowler. He's been pretty good in his NFL career. 12 months ago, the team that he was just on wanted to sign him to a very pricey contract, and I'm glad it played out for Cincinnati. I still feel like it's an upgrade in their situation at the left tackle. I remember we recorded a podcast the next day when they signed him, and we're like, oh, okay, let's talk about it. Let's talk about everything Orlando Brown Jr. What does that mean? Is he better than Jonah Williams? Is this an upgrade? I think so. You mentioned Jonah Williams when you were talking about him early on. Is there anything else that really stands out about Orlando Brown Jr. that's going to be an extreme positive for the left side?
Yeah, I think that Orlando Brown is somebody that can actually move defenders. A lot of the NFL, this is not a knock on Jonah Williams. This is a lot of NFL offensive linemen. They're able to get leverage and they're able to win their blocks that way. And you're trying to win a strategic stalemate almost for most offensive linemen. You know, you're trying to I'm going to get my hips and butt over here so that I create a hole with the center going the opposite way or the guard, whoever going I'm thinking center because this is also what I had to do when I was playing. I was 180-pound left guard. I was not moving guys very much. So I would get hold point and be able to get my hips in a certain way so that I create a hole. It's not because I'm blasting a guy and moving him that way. It's also why I didn't love run blocking. I couldn't move guys. But Orlando Brown does more than that. I think Howard Mudd had a great quote on this. The late Howard Mudd, who's the offensive line coach for the Colts when Manning was there and a lot of other teams. But he said, basically, we don't all have Larry Allen. You know, if you have one of those, that's great. Most of us are trying to, just win. I can't remember if he called it a stalemate or whatever. I like to think of a strategic stalemates, just getting in position. Getting in position is winning and getting leverage. But Orlando Brown is very, very strong. He's very, very big. He doesn't need to just win leverage. He moves guys. I think that's the big part of this. Your solo blocks is what I'm talking about here. Double teams, you're hopefully moving guys with double teams, but with your solo blocks, Orlando Brown will move a guy. He'll move him where he doesn't want to go, exert his will on the defense and be able to push them and create a hole that way. Doesn't just have to win his leverage and create a hole by not giving up ground. I think that's something that's kind of rare. It's not so rare that he's the only one in the league that can do it. I mean, when you're talking about like Trent Williams and Teron Armstead and all those guys, like, yeah, they're able to do this too. But this is something that's extremely valuable. He's not a extremely good mover, product of being huge, but he is able to move defenders really well. And I think that's something that's going to be added to the Bengals rushing attack is the right side was able to do that a little bit. Alex Kappa is very strong. When Lyle Collins is healthy and you just ask him straight ahead, he's still moving guys where he's, blocking straight ahead, especially double teams with Kappa and things like that. But they didn't have that on the left side so much. Volson and Jonah and Karras basically all strategic stalemate type winners on the offensive line. Whereas Orlando Brown, he's a mover. He will move guys. So there'll be some highlights of him taking defenders where they don't want to go and creating some openings for the running backs. I think that's something where you could run a lot of different stuff now to either side because you either have Orlando Brown on one side who's going to help Volson be a better run blocker just by virtue of working those double teams with him. And on the other side, could Jonah be a better run blocker when he's working with Kappa? Because Kappa's more experienced, Kappa's stronger than Volson. And I think now maybe you could run whatever you want to either side. That double team should move a defender either way and be able to run left or right. But if I have one run play to, get 3 yards, I'm going to find a way to just get behind Orlando Brown and let him try to move somebody for me.
when people get down on the Orlando Brown Jr. signing, it's mostly outside of Cincinnati. I always think, I'm like, did you watch Joe Burrow's offensive line over his whole entire career in Cincinnati? I mean, him to have a little bit of time because he does get rid of the ball really quickly, which is awesome. But I think this is, if they can stay healthy, it is Joe Burrow's best offensive line that he's had in Cincinnati. And that is so huge because this offense does feel like it's just getting started.
Yeah, I think that it's all great. No, I think there's stuff that's negative with Brown, but I think he's a good fit for the Bengals offense, and I think that the Bengals really, with the way they've constructed their offensive line, need more Orlando Brown looking guys than they do guys who are smaller and can run really well. I think that's what they wanted originally, and that's even probably what they wanted when they drafted Jonah Williams. But as the scheme has evolved, become more downhill at you type runs and trying to really drive guys forward, I think you want big hogs doing that. You don't want little guys that are more zone based trying to do that. And for Jonah Williams' credit, he keeps putting on weight and looks like good weight. So maybe this is the year he fully ascends at right tackle. He's gotten bigger. Maybe he can handle those bull rushes and he can move defenders. These guys show the Bengals like this is what you're going to be missing when you didn't pay me. Then I think we should be rooting for that, right?
Yeah.
Like we should be rooting for him to get big, strong, and to have a great year at right tackle because that's better than
They pay tackles. They pay tackles.
I don't think they will. I don't think they'll pay both tackles.
Too much of a like, hey, you got to move. He wants to move on. It won't happen because of everything that
I don't even know because when you listen to him talk, it sounds like he still loves the coaching staff and his teammates, front office. I'm not sure if that's 100% because they never called him about. They still haven't called him or talked to him. So that part's not great, but everything else, he does seem genuinely excited. I do think there's probably more damage there than he lets on, and he probably wants to move on. That's also probably why the trade request came out. But then find out market's not as big as you thought, or maybe he didn't want to go to some of those places that were interested. I don't know. Although it sounded like Jacksonville was interested, but then Anton Harrison fell to them. A whole thing. But end of the day, I don't know of a scenario that they pay Jonah Williams. I mean, maybe if he is like a top 3 right tackle, and you're not talking about a long-term payment here, and this is a big jump. If he just jumps up to being Penei Sewell, like, do you just tag him if you've got the T deal in place? That would be my thought is, you could. If he's that good, that's the one way I see him on the team next year. But otherwise, I'm kind of like, all right, we'll see.
Could you imagine? I hope we're having that conversation during the season. I hope we are talking about Jonah Williams having a career year. That would be absolutely amazing at the right tackle position. But hey, we'll see what happens when we get there. A little more to talk about in the offseason for the Cincinnati Bengals before they get to training camp next on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. To be completely honest, again, reminder, we are at a pretty quiet, dead period for the Cincinnati Bengals. Not hearing a whole lot. I know Joe Burrow changed his name on his caption game on Instagram to Joey De La Cruz. He's embracing the Red Hot Reds. The Reds are currently losing after their nice little win streak. So we'll see what happens between now and training camp if the Reds are going to be making postseason. But that doesn't matter because it's a Bengals podcast. So right now, I know you said it before we got on the podcast, or maybe you said in the very beginning when you don't get on social media a lot during the off season. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I'm on it so much during the season, just promoting my articles, reading what smart people have to say about what's going on with the Bengals or around the NFL. I'm an NFL fan too. Like that's the big part of this is like I love the league. I love like the Bengals go out and I still have opinions, takes, guys I like. It was cool seeing. Well, I've always loved Andy Reid, even though that's become a big I don't think Bengals fans hate Andy Reid. I think out of all the Chiefs, I think that would be the one guy I'm allowed to be okay with.
Andy Reid has always given Cincinnati major props after those matchups and things like that. So I don't and he's look, I know Patrick Mahomes is really good, but Andy Reid is a very, Very.
First ballot Hall of Fame coach, best offensive mind of the generation. Yeah, that's pretty good.
You can't really count out. I mean, you have Andy Reid as your head coach, so that's very helpful. But
But
well,
then,
you're
yeah, I don't know. I
making,
love the. I was just saying, like in the Super Bowl, I still had guys I like Andy Reid, and then I liked so many guys in the Philly offensive line. You know, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelsey, Landon Dickerson was my guy coming out of college. So there's like all these guys that like I want to see these guys do well. I wasn't rooting for. I was kind of rooting for the Eagles, just being a
oh, I
little
was.
butthurt. Not a little. I was definitely rooting for the Eagles, but I was happy for Andy Reid when they won. I was just kind of like, it is cool. He wins his second. He's going to be a walk-in, like once he retires into the Hall of Fame type coach. Because if you could imagine, it's hard. 5 years ago, I think you're talking about a fringe candidate with Andy Reid, even though he was the same
Really?
offensive mind. No Super Bowls. How many
Well,
coaches
yeah,
have ever made it without a Super Bowl?
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
You're
even though he was one of the most winning coaches, he developed these awesome systems. It's why, like, if Kyle Shanahan retired right now, probably doesn't make it, even though he's been a genius and he's put together all these big wins, made a Super Bowl, and he lost, and then he's been to a few NFC Championship games. Okay, there's Super Bowl winning coaches that are in the Hall of Fame, but now it feels like Andy Reid has gone in 5 years of his like 20-something year career. In 5 years, he went from not really having a good shot of making it into being maybe a first ballot Hall of Famer.
And that's why, and I guess I don't feel the same about being happy for Andy Reid for a second Super Bowl. No, I don't want it to come across like that. He does seem like a great guy, and honestly, amazing football mind. And it will be easier when Cincinnati finally wins the Lombardi to be like, oh man, great career, Andy Reid. You did a great job. But this matchup alone, it's a really good decision to stay off social media and Twitter. I know a couple weeks ago, actually, we never hit it on the podcast, which is so crazy because there was the summer break for the Cincinnati Bengals. We could have talked about it to kind of fill the segments. Everybody knows what happened. Joe praised Patrick Mahomes, and I wouldn't even say praise. He just said, yeah, he's quarterback number one. Jamar Chase had a little fun with it because he likes his quarterback, and he said, Pat who? Pat goes to the Super Bowl ring night, and he says, this is who with the Super Bowl rings. And Travis Kelce sounds like he's in WWE doing his interviews and doesn't like what Jamar Chase said, has his comments. I won't repeat those. All of this. I love the rivalry. I think it is one of the best in sports. And what's so crazy about it is they were a play away from it not being a rivalry. But still kind of a little bit of one because of the hatred between the two teams and how close the games are when they play each other. They're absolutely insane, and I'm pumped for December 31st, what that game's going to mean. Hopefully it's number 1 seed or number 2 seed, depending on, where both teams are at by that time of the season. They'll probably see each other again in the postseason. But it's fun to watch the players go at each other. I kind of like that. But the fan base, it's a little crazy out there in the Twitter world. And I guess I will say this. One thing I don't understand. Look, number one, I don't know what it's like to win a championship. I really wish I knew what it was like. I think that would be really awesome. The Bengals have been close in back-to-back years. I'm going to tell you right now, if the Cincinnati Bengals just came off a Super Bowl win, the last team I want to talk about is the other teams that I lost to or that I beat in the AFC Championship game. I am talking about my Super Bowl probably every day. I'm excited about it. I'm pumped. It's very weird to me that there's so much I don't want to use the word obsession, but there's just so much from that Kansas City fan base right now when it comes to the Cincinnati Bengals, and I just don't know what it is.
I mean, yes, I would be with you. Keep in mind, this is their second. So they already spent probably that. Well, I guess technically their third, but nobody on Twitter was around for the Super Bowl 3,
Yeah.
where Curly Culp should have won player of the game. You can go back and watch that. I firmly believe he gave Mike Tingle off the business, and Len Dawson didn't really do that much. But I watched it one time, and it wasn't really paying that much attention. I was watching the old Super Bowl because I want to see it. But anyway, nobody watched that one. So this is basically their second ring. Their first one, they probably spent doing exactly what you're talking about, where just soak it in, enjoy it.
Yeah.
They probably could have enjoyed this one more because it did feel, I think even back when I was on Twitter a lot, which was like right after the season and into the draft and all of that stuff, it was kind of still going on or like already starting. And to me, I was just like, look, whatever, they won. Mm-hmm. I think some of it just comes from winning against absolutely everyone. Every time they ever play and need to win a game, except the Bengals. That is the one team that's been the thorn in their side, even though they finally won. You know, they are 1-3. I don't think of it as anything other than just like kind of a little bit of frustration too. I've had very many cathartic experiences where I finally overcome something, and I am I gloat a lot. It's usually not a person. It'll be like, finally. I mean, it happened last week. I played pickup basketball, and I missed so many threes to start a bunch of games. This was like the third game in, but I was shooting like probably like 20%, 15% from three. And I hit this three to start the third game we played. And I just let out like a primal yell about being so excited about I finally hit one. And I feel like that's kind of what it feels like, where they were 0-3, and then they finally won one. They haven't let that cathartic like win go. Like, yeah, we finally did that. You know, we finally slayed the beast that was giving us issues. And I'm sure if this gets posted or whatever, it'll be all about how like we don't care, we won 2 rings. It's like, I know you don't really care that much, but I do think that's the only reason that any Chiefs fan would hear this Bengals podcast in the first place. Is just the rivalry. That's the only team that you haven't been able to beat every single time you ever want to in the past couple of years. I think that's the big thing. I guess the Bucks, but they were so unhealthy when they played that Buccaneers team. That Buccaneers team was really good, though. I do think fully healthy, it would have been a game. And I think you see that by the Bucks dominating them when they were injured. But that would have been interesting to see how that goes. It was also a 1-year team. They were done after that, even though they tried to run it back. Yeah, that's where I am. Is just I do think it's a little bit of the 1-3 thing. If they were 3-1, I don't think they would really care. I think they would just like, yeah, you beat us in that one AFC Championship game.
And I just want to say this because I do see a little bit of it's absolutely wild that Cleveland wants to get in this conversation, but
they've never
they're there, but they will be like, you have this. I agree with you. I think the biggest thing is it's the 1-3. And they finally got over it in one of the biggest moments, and the games have been absolutely insane. I mean, you can go back and watch every single one of them. Something crazy happens in all of them. For Cincinnati to come back in the AFC Championship game, and I felt like they were driving to kick the game-winning field goal, the Joseph Asai hit, which I still don't blame him for because they thought he had a great game. It was just an insane matchup every single time. Do you think it's the best rivalry in the NFL?
Yeah. What else compares?
Nothing. There's absolutely nothing, and maybe we're too close to it, and we're a little biased.
It's everything that they were trying to hype Bills Chiefs up as.
I just don't. I can't get in the Bills hype.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. Is that this rivalry is everything that it felt like NFL writers were trying to say Bills Chiefs was going to be, where that's going to be blah blah blah. That's going to be the best rivalry in sports. It's 2 of the best quarterbacks, and it's just like, hey, how's it going? This is actually what you're talking about. And it actually feels like some of them don't really want it to be that. Like, hold on. No, we want to Bills Chiefs. Not always appreciated the same way, but I think it's the best rivalry in sports. What else compares? Do you think the Chiefs fans give 2 craps about the Bills? No. Bills fans care. Bills fans care about the Chiefs because they can't get over that hump other than regular season games. This is exactly where I am with the whole the Bengals versus Bills for the Chiefs is A, the Bengals are your biggest threat. They're the one that's beaten you in the playoffs. But B, the Chiefs fans lose those regular season games. If the Bengals only ever won regular season games against the Chiefs, it would just be like, yeah, who cares?
Yeah.
But it's that AFC Championship game they won against them as well that kind of digs in. It's just like kind of sits in there a little because the Bills have won 2 in a row in the regular season against the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't mattered. That doesn't like
losing
even me talking like who cares?
But it's like losing to Cleveland. None of those games impact Cincinnati getting to
exactly. But if Cleveland beats you in the dividivisional round, then you care.
Yeah, then that's a problem. But it's so wild. I agree with you. I do think it is that record, and it's like if you're in the AFC West, you never have to hear from the Chiefs because they don't care about you. They just don't care. They're like, sorry, we have.
But I bet you so much money that those fan bases are the ones tagging the Chiefs and like trying to do this the smack talking and whatnot. I'm sure Broncos fans are trying to hype up Sean Payton and Russell Wilson's going to bounce back, and the Chargers keep going with the Justin Herbert thing. And well, Raiders fans are always insane. Yeah, they're the Browns of the whole operation.
It's there to make it 4 teams. Like, that's all it is.
They're there to make it 4 teams. They're going to be very excited about that team, even good or bad. Got to respect that at least. Is that the Browns watched Baker Mayfield have a bad year, and they just thought, you know what? Remember when he won a playoff game? We're just going to get super excited about that. And that's where they are now with the whole – I can't believe how excited Browns fans are for Deshaun Watson, where I would be so nervous. Like, you paid him what?
You see those videos? And again, you don't see them because you're not on social media, which I highly recommend.
I dabble. I just don't go on much for my sanity.
He throws a football, and they're like, oh, gosh. Deshaun Watson, I can't believe I'm saying his name on this podcast. He throws the ball. Did you see him throw the ball with the cameraman? And it's like, I hope he could throw a football 5 yards. I mean, that would be
$50 million.
The hype is real. They're counting. This is how sad it is this offseason. They're counting titles before the AFC North was created.
Oh, of course. I mean, look.
When you have 0, that's where you're at right now. It's
the Bengals take either one of the Bengals' last 2 seasons, and it would be the greatest season of the Browns' 60-year NFL history. Let's throw out the whole 8-team nonsense when Jim Brown was able to lead them to their championships. They can love those. They've never seen them live. I don't assume. I mean, shoot. I mean, how old would you have to be to have seen that live? And then, is that person on Twitter, on NFL Twitter? Probably not. So I just let that go. It's like, if you want to count it. But it almost feels just like a technicality. Like, when Steelers fans bring it up, I feel like they almost ever only bring up the 2 Super Bowls they won that they saw with their eyes. They don't bring up the 70s one unless they want to talk about most ever or something.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the Steelers, and there's a little connection here. Obviously, Nick, our producer. I was having a conversation with a Steelers fan, and look, I'm not comparing Cincinnati.
Was it Nick, our producer?
It wasn't Nick, our producer, but it obviously Cincinnati doesn't have Super Bowls, and the Pittsburgh Steelers do. And I had mentioned to him, I said, man, it really feels like Cincinnati's getting a lot of heat right now, and there's just a lot of people against Joe Burrow, this team, and I don't understand it because they're so fun, and it's all over the NFL. And he said, Lindsay, do you know how much hate we used to get all the time when we were winning? It happens all the time. If you are a winning football team, every fan base is coming for you. And, that part isn't fun, but you just be like, I don't care. I get to watch a winning football team, and that's what's out there.
I actually thought about that before. I don't remember, and it was a different age, but I feel like, I'm not saying don't fight with people online, although I kind of am saying that for your own mental health if it does affect you. But I feel like I didn't see the Patriots Colts fans of the 2000s really care when somebody was like, I think Drew Brees is better than Peyton Manning. It's like, he's not, but who cares?
Yeah.
They just kind of moved on. So I feel like we as a Bengals community should kind of take that approach of, Chubb's, I don't know, Chubb 2K season tweeted out Deshaun Watson's better than Joe Burrow, and he's just kind of like, he's not, whatever. Yeah. Who cares? I'm not getting into this.
Yeah, you just go to their timeline, and then you can be like, "Yep, that's probably one I shouldn't even read or reply to." But no, and definitely I'm guilty of it because you'll see those Twitter accounts out there.
Oh, they hook me sometimes. Sometimes it's good bait. Sometimes it's
fun. And if you're a like a FanDuel or any other NFL Twitter, I know FanDuel's not, but any other Twitter handle, it's smart to put the Bengals in your tweet because you'll get a lot of interaction for sure. But no, I think I think we're in the off season. Look, that's going to continue. It's going to heat up in September. And of course, when we get closer to that New Year's Eve game, it's going to be crazy with the rivalry. But yeah, I agree. I think it's the best in the NFL. There's really not one that I can compare it to right now. And it should be fun. But
yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, when was the last time, like, inside the conference but outside the division like this? I think Manning, Brady, but that would be multiple teams. I do think that one was probably up there. I mean, Manning, Brady. Really? Yeah, look, that was must-see TV sometimes.
You're right. It's Manning and Tom Brady. What am I thinking?
Yeah.
I mean,
They're
that's
like two best quarterbacks of all time playing at the same time. It's great. But other than that, I mean, the next closest I can think of off the top of my head, it only lasted a couple of years, was I think the Panthers Seahawks had a rivalry going, like 2015 era. That was a little something, but
okay.
didn't feel as big. It wasn't like back to back NFC Championship games, slobber knocker fight type things. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, these are two young hip teams. I don't know if the players hate each other or anything. I don't remember that at all. Yeah, this to me, I don't want to jump the gun or anything, but it feels like the very start of that Colts Patriots type rivalry where, it was a very big back and forth. Manning Brady talking a lot of storylines all the time, classic games left and right. And, you hope that you are the Patriots out of those two.
Yeah, can the Bengals get on the Patriots side now? Start sucking up those trophies. That would be fun. But no, it's fun. I'm gonna enjoy it for the time being, and just have a little fun with it because Cincinnati's fun right now. And if everybody can stay healthy, they should be the same exact team that we saw in 2022, if not better. I know you're still taking a break over on all Bengals. Is that correct? Hitting
Yeah.
that training camp?
Wait, what?
You're gonna hit it back up on training camp? You're gonna get back into the groove of training camp preseason?
Yes, yeah, definitely preseason. Somewhere, maybe we'll see. I don't know when. Yeah, I'm just taking the mental health break. It's a grind. I don't know. It's just,
dude. I mean, what are you gonna say right now? To be completely
that's
honest,
where I am. I read what other people are writing sometimes, and it's just like, man, I don't want to write this.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. It's all good stuff. And if you haven't checked it out already, still plenty of off-season content, all Bengals. You can see them over on Twitter, Bengals_Sands. You can follow me at LNDS Patterson. We will be back next week. Sorry, we will record this week. We'll be back later this week with a double header mailbag. So make sure you send those tweets. Thanks for listening to It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati.